Welcome. My name is Thierry Plante, and I'm a Senior Consumer Education Officer at the FCAC. I'm part of the team who creates the educational resources found under the Money and Finance topic on Canada.ca. Thank you for joining us. So today we'll focus on tips and tools that can help you manage your finances, avoid debt, or get a handle on existing debt. So why focus on debt and financial planning today? Well, it certainly is particularly important to understand our finances right now. And equipping ourselves with the right information and the right tools can help us make the best decisions for our needs and ultimately reach our financial goals. So let's get started. So the reality is that many people need to borrow money. So for example, to buy a house. And more recently, many have had to borrow money to make ends meet. And in some cases, it also means that sometimes, for a whole host of reasons, some of us borrow more than we can afford. And borrowing money to do any of these things is also called credit. So to help avoid the pitfalls of borrowing money and to learn to make the best use of credit, we'll look at the following. So the influence of emotions on borrowing habits, the pros and cons of borrowing money, good versus bad debt, how debt affects your credit report and credit score, practical tips on how to avoid debt or manage existing debt, how to improve your financial health with the budget planner, and then how to make plans to save or repay debt with the financial goal calculator. But our goal today is to focus on what's most important so that you can take action as soon as possible. So how you feel about credit, as well as your habits and your values, influence the way you borrow. So for example, do you tend to borrow for needs or for wants? Better understanding why you consider something a need versus a want could help you borrow more wisely. And then one way to find out is by looking at some statements about debt, like these on your screen. See if any of these statements resonate with you. I never use credit if I can avoid it. I borrow money, but I'm not comfortable until I've paid it back. I don't worry about how much debt I'm carrying because I make the minimum monthly payments. And I can't control my use of credit. Identifying which statement suits you the most can help you determine if you should change the way you feel towards credit. And remember, credit is neither good nor bad, it's a tool. If you can use it wisely, it can help you either reach your financial goals or get out of difficult or unexpected situations. Other factors might also influence your relationship with credit. So for example, if you've seen or experienced problems with debt in the past, you might have become uncomfortable with the idea of borrowing. If you want to have what your family or your friends have, or do what they do, but you don't have the money, you might get into debt just trying to keep up with them. Also, if you've already developed the habit of buying whatever you want whenever you want, you might find the habit hard to break, even if your financial situation changes. If you tend to make impulsive decisions, you might get into debt without thinking too much about it. And finally, if you're exposed to advertising, offers to get more credit, or buy now, pay later plans, you might end up with more debt than you intended to. So take a moment to think about the different factors that apply to you and how they affect your ability to handle credit. In the end, the more aware you are of what can influence the way you manage credit, the better you can control your behavior and avoid running into debt problems. This can also help you come up with a solid plan to pay back your debt if you decide to borrow. Another important thing you can do to better manage or avoid debt is to consider the pros and cons of credit every time you plan to borrow. This will help you determine if it's the best option based on your current situation. So the most common pros are that you don't have to wait to save up the money to buy or do what you want, so you can achieve your goals sooner. Also, you can build a positive credit history by using credit responsibly. So this can make it easier for you to borrow in the future. And then finally, it allows you to pay for unexpected expenses, like car repairs. Now for the cons. When you borrow, you have to budget for your regular debt repayments. And having to repay a loan therefore limits the amount of money you have available now and in the future. And then don't forget that interest adds to the cost of your debt. And then finally, if you don't make your minimum loan payments or reimburse the loan in time, it will negatively impact your credit report, which can make it more difficult to borrow in the future. So next, it's important to determine if the amount you intend to borrow would be a good debt or a bad debt. Obviously, good versus bad debt depends on individual circumstances, but financial experts do often distinguish the two according to the following criteria. So for example, good debt is an investment in something that creates value or produces more wealth in the long run. So for example, a mortgage, a student loan, or buying something beneficial for your health can be good debts. However, bad debt is credit taken on to buy something that immediately goes down in value, or to buy something that you can't repay in time or in full, especially since interest charges will lead to even more debt. For example, borrowing to buy an expensive car and not being able to make the high monthly payments when your situation changes can be bad debt. If your car is worth less than the amount you owe on your loan, and you trade in your car to buy another, you may end up having to pay for a larger loan and then more interest charges. And taking out a personal loan to pay for monthly expenses, like your cell phone bill, can also be bad debt. The next important thing to do is to figure out how much debt is appropriate to take on. It usually depends on your personal circumstances, like how much money you make and how easily you're able to repay your debt. But a good starting point to determine this is calculating your debt load. And you can calculate your debt load by using two types of debt. Your total monthly housing costs, which includes your mortgage payments, property taxes, heating, and 50% of your condo fees if you live in a condo, and your total debt, which is everything you owe, including your total monthly housing costs. So as a general guideline, your total monthly housing costs payments shouldn't add up to more than 32% of your gross monthly income. That's before taxes. And your total debt payments should add up to no more than 40% of your gross monthly income. So if your debt repayments are higher than these percentages, it might mean that your debt load is becoming unmanageable. You should be very careful about taking on additional debt. And a higher debt load might also start to discourage lenders from loaning you any more money. So next, there's the question of determining what's the most appropriate type of credit to use. So for example, should you finance your car through the dealership or through your bank? Should you get a student loan or take out a personal bank loan? This is where you need to take the time to look at all the details of the different types of credit you can choose from. So before you sign the contract, you should know things like the interest rate and how it's calculated, when interest starts being charged, your minimum monthly payment, and any other charges or fees that apply. Now, this is obviously a broad topic, and like for all the information that is presented today, I invite you to come check out FCAC's resources on the Canada.ca website. But for topics related to today's webinar, I recommend starting on this page. So one last important point to cover is the impact of borrowing on your credit report and on your credit score. So your credit report is a summary of your credit history. It's created when you borrow money or apply for credit for the first time. And your credit score is based on the information in your credit report. So why does your credit history matter? Well, because it can affect your finances today and in the future. Financial institutions look at your credit report and your credit score to decide if they will lend you money. They also use it to determine how much interest they will charge you to borrow money with them. So if you have no credit history or a poor credit history, it could be harder and more expensive for you to get a credit card, a loan, or a mortgage. It could even affect your ability to rent a house or an apartment or to get hired. But if you have a good credit history, you might be able to get lower interest rate on loans. And this can save you a lot of money over time. So think twice about using credit if you think that the way you handle it might have a negative impact on your credit history. And also, make it a habit to order your credit report at least once a year from the 2 credit bureaus in Canada, Equifax and TransUnion. So before moving on to practical tools that can help you better manage your finances, here are a few things you can do to avoid the pitfalls of borrowing money. Use your credit cards wisely. You can consider setting up automatic bill payments with your financial institution to ensure your payments are made in time. You could also sleep on it to avoid impulse buying. Carefully consider buy now, pay later offers. Also, plan how you will save for specific financial goals. And keep track of your expenses and manage them with a budget. And on that last point, FCAC recently developed a great tool to help you create and maintain a budget. We'll look at it in detail in a few minutes. Finally, sometimes, despite your best efforts, you may find yourself with more debt than you can handle. It might be overwhelming at first, but it is possible to be debt-free again. If your debts are piling up, here are some things you can do. You can use your savings to pay off outstanding balances. You might be able to cash in an investment or sell something valuable. And if so, make sure to keep a regular savings plan and an emergency fund to the extent possible. You could pay down your debts with the highest interest first. If you carry a balance on your credit card, this is probably your debt with the highest interest rate. So use cash or a debit card while you pay it off to avoid accumulating even more debt. You could also switch to less expensive credit cards. Look at both the interest rate and the annual fee when comparing credit cards. And FCAC has a great tool on Canada.ca to help you do this. Also, contact your creditors. As soon as you realize that you're having trouble making ends meet, call your creditors to explain the situation. In most cases, they will work out a payment plan that will make it easier for you to pay off your debts. If you're mostly concerned about your mortgage payments, so for example, if your mortgage deferral period is ending, we also have a great information on the different options available to you. Finally, talk to trusted financial professionals. These can include your bank representative, your financial planner, or a credit counseling agency. They can help you look at your debt situation, they can help you determine what you need now and in the future, they can help you make a budget, and find ways to pay off debt. But finding the right help can be tricky, so look for accredited professionals. FCAC's webpage on getting help from a credit counselor is a good place to start. We also recommend consulting the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy's debt portal. But ultimately, the best course of action is to keep your debt to a minimum. And budgeting and goal planning are great proactive ways to do this. They can also help you figure out how to repay debt. So FCAC has 2 great tools to help you do this: the budget planner and the financial goal calculator. So let's have a quick look at them. We only have time for a quick look at the main features of both tools today. So I hope you'll come visit the Canada.ca website and try them after this webinar is over. If you'd like to follow along, you can find them on the Financial Tools and Calculators webpage available at canada.ca/financial-tools. I'd like to start out by reinforcing that all FCAC tools and resources are free and unbiased, and that they're available in both English and French. So first, let's look at the Budget Planner, an amazing budget tool we created to help you better manage your finances. You can create your budget in 3 simple steps: enter your data, save your budget, and review your summary and suggestions. You can personalize your budget by answering 5 simple questions about your family situation, your age, your work, your housing situation, and your budgeting goals. This will give you a customized budget template. as well as personalized tips and suggestions. So for example, if you have kids, your budget will include categories and items that are related to kids, like daycare expenses. In answering those basic questions will also allow you to compare your financial habits with Canadians in a similar situation at the end of your budget. So, I encourage you to take the time to fill these preliminary questions. It's worth it. Your budget page shows you three main sections: income, savings, and expenses. All you need to do is enter your data and select the right period for each item. I'll just enter a few more entries. So we've added descriptions to certain items to clarify what should be entered. So if you're not sure about something, you can mouse over the question mark and the tool will provide details. And while you enter data, you'll receive tips here and there that are based on the budgeting goal you've selected at the beginning. Your incoming and outgoing money can also be displayed in waterfall view, so you can clearly see your savings and expenses against your income. And when you're entering your amounts in each category, the tool will provide you with an average range of what people usually spend. But it's important to note that these are average Canadian statistics, and they may not apply to all situations. You should use them as guidelines only. You can save your budget online. You can come back to it anytime with any device. You also have a print or Excel export option if you prefer working on it offline. Your results provide you with your budget graphics. So the first one shows you your incoming versus outgoing money. The second shows you where your money is currently going. And the third provides you with a comparison to your average Canadian. There's also a Next Steps tab that provides you with suggestions to improve your financial situation. And then last but not least, creating and maintaining your budget allows you to earn badges. These badges are given as a reward for your accomplishments. You can even share them with your friends and family on social media. Our final tool to help you manage your debt and finances wisely, the Financial Goal Calculator, helps you plan for a debt repayment goal or a savings goal. So here's now a quick look at FCAC's Financial Goal Calculator. If you want to manage debt, click on Plan to Get Out of Debt. And here you can experiment with a few different ways to repay your debt. So for example, you can see what would happen if you make your payments weekly instead of monthly. Or you could find out how much each repayment would have to be if you wanted to have your debt repaid by a specific date. So next, you can get a full report about how many payments you would have to make, when you'll be done repaying your debt, and how much total interest you will have paid depending on the options you chose. And finally, you can save your plan and keep it on your computer or on your phone. The Set Your Savings Goals section of the tool is almost identical, except that this time, you can use it to find out the best way to save to reach a specific goal, like saving up for a big purchase. Again, thank you so much for your interest in our webinar today. It was a pleasure for me to provide you an overview of the educational resources available to help you and other Canadians improve their financial literacy. So happy Financial Literacy Month, everyone, and make sure to visit us again at canada.ca/money.